Today we wanted to focus a little bit more for the beginner on the how-tos. So obviously we'll get into team construction, the salary cap, player ratings at a future show. But today we wanted to talk a little bit about the strategy behind probably the most important piece to those people who really try to competitively play the game and compete and try to really make large moves up the leaderboard. And that is the chips, as they call them. There's four of them in the game: the wild card, the bench boost, the free hit, and of course, the triple captain. And we're going to get into each one of these a little bit more in detail because each one has a different value, I would say, and also has a different approach and opinion by many players. I myself am not a big fan of the bench boost. I'll be honest. That's the one we're going to start with. I think people overrate it. They hold on to it all year. I almost feel like it's a crutch. You do 3 weeks worth of transfers to try to get to a good spot, and then some team gets COVID and they cancel the match in the middle of the week, or your double game week gets huge rotation. So for me, there's a few keys to the bench boost. I found a great graphic here. I thought really came in, and it's really a starting spot. Get quality players, make sure your subs are going to play. Well, that's smart. And have subs with favorable fixtures. Mateusz, we'll start with you on this one. Out of the four, how do you personally feel about the bench boost? And in your couple years, what are either some good experiences or a horror story that you've had with the bench boost?
I feel like with the bench boost, kind of to your point about it being the least important chip, I kind of agree in the sense that just because of the way that I structure my team, I normally don't put any stock in my bench. I will try and keep my bench at as little of salary as possible. So I'm $4 million defender, $5 million midfielder, maybe a $5.5 million forward, and then a $4 million goalkeeper. Because I don't really expect them to get any points for me. I'd rather invest all that into the team that's starting for me. So the bench boost for me doesn't really come into play. And I think maybe that's one thing that I would want to try and work on this year is seeing how I can at least develop some sort of sense to have a decent enough rotation just in case those moments happen where injuries do happen. COVID happens still. So you never really quite know, and you don't want to dig yourself a hole by kind of investing all your money into your starting team, because then if you have a couple hits, a couple bad injuries, you're really starting to fall behind with some of the negative points you've got to take on that. So I feel like bench boost for me, there have been some times I think double game weeks are best for the bench boost because of the rotation in teams. So then you might be able to see some of those players get some minutes that typically don't. So you don't have to spend too much on the bench, and you can still get a little bit back for that. So I think overall that's kind of where my head is at when I think about the bench boost.
Great. And Timucin, we'll come to you with this one. As I know, as someone who's been in the Discord channel with you on a match day when you find out three of your starters aren't playing, and then two of your bench guys aren't playing, you get frustrated. So the idea of having to figure out how to make 15 of your players actually be fit and active probably is something else. When were you even aware of what the bench boost was midway through last year? Was because I remember there were a couple times where there's some of the chips you were actually like surprised at how they operated and worked. Was that one you had kind of used in the past, or was that one that was newer to you last season?
Honestly, I think that's out of all the chips. I think it's the most, I guess, like self-explanatory one where you're like, oh, I get this. It's just, but going back to what Mateusz is saying, it's like in terms of like timing and when you would have it is probably trickier. I'm kind of like the opposite of what Mateusz is thinking. I mean, I've done the same thing where I feel like the only time to use it effectively, I think, is those double game weeks. And that's when I did it, for example, last season. And really was a huge part of my, minor successes during those weeks. But I think just for that 1 week, I think it's not worth investing extra on your bench for guys who are not gonna play. I think I would still, I mean, one of the few things I got right last year, which, like I say, few, it was probably spending as little as possible on the bench so that you can kind of spend more on the guys on the field. Having said that, going back to what you're saying, and one of my many grumps about this whole ordeal over here, you guys will hear over and over again, is that, especially when players get rotated and things. But I think the way to kind of attack that is more about how you build your team as opposed to keeping a bench, because regardless of how good your bench is, if Pep or like Tuchel or somebody like rotates players out of nowhere, and suddenly guys that you kind of rely on, probably spend a lot of money on, are suddenly not starting. I mean, regardless of what you do, you're not going to have the same value guy on the bench anyway, production wise or whatever. So I understand the graphic. Obviously, you want to pick guys that probably start for their teams, but that means investing a lot more on the bench. Like I say, my strategy moving forwards, just basically following what I did, would be probably investing as little as possible on the bench. So not use the bench boost until a double week, and maybe at that time, which we'll get into next, I'm sure, but use maybe like the free hits or wild card or something like that at that time, to be able to strengthen the bench at once and then use the double points and get the most out of them.
Yeah, and it's a great point actually, and I think that's if you were to listen to some of the podcasts and some of the professionals that actually report on this game for a living, which is kind of crazy that people get paid to do this, but there are like paid sites for this, not just three blokes like us just chatting it up on a
Giving it away
what the
for
hell day
free
is it?
over here.
Yeah, exactly, on a Thursday. For now, people. For now. No. But it is to actually use your second half wild card to basically prepare for the bench boost. So a lot of folks will actually, you have those double game weeks where you'll get like a small double game week, and then the following week is like the massive double game week. And a guy will use his wild card in game week 28 with the mindset of the bench boost in 29. And they really go for like the ramp up. Now, it can blow up in your face if you wild card and three of the guys you pick up get injured or pick up a yellow card suspension. We're going to get more into that, like the different things that can happen where players miss matches, why they miss matches. International breaks are notorious. If you have a bunch of Brazilians, they often sit the first match after the international break. So it's little things like that in the preparation of transfers. And as we get deeper into the conversation, I think we'll talk more. The reason for me the bench boost is a weaker one is you change the philosophy of your squad to what you guys are talking about by getting players that will target for one match week, which always frustrates me. So it makes me wonder, and we'll get into the free hit. In those big double game weeks, would you be better off just free hitting into 11 players that have the best chance to score on your starters and not actually go with the bench boost? And I think that's some of the strategy that players kick around